Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening from wherever you're joining us. And welcome to this week's edition of Truth Under the Microscope. We are on webinar 3, and today's title is Checking Claims and Clarifying Science for Various Audiences. Based on the consortium's emphasis on informed decision-making, biosafety, public engagement, policy, innovation, and building public trust. That's where we're running this series, Truth Under the Microscope. So I want to warmly welcome each one of you, wherever you are tuned. Type your name in the chat, continent, and country as we welcome on board. So thank you. I can see you typing your names. Type your name in the chat and tell us where you are tuned in from. Welcome. And as we start off, based on the topic of today's webinar, which is checking claims, clarifying science for various audiences. Once you have typed your name and the continent and the country, then please proceed to type the answer to this question: which audience do you most often communicate science to? Which audience do you most often communicate science to? All right. So a few housekeeping rules. This is a webinar series being run by the African Genetic Biocontrol Consortium, the Biotrust Institute, and the Elizabeth R. Griffin Program at the Johns Hopkins University Center for Health Security. So welcome. We are glad that our partners found it possible to join us in this webinar. So participants are encouraged to ask questions. Type your questions in the chat, which will be addressed in the course of the webinar. And we encourage you to engage. We encourage you to type all the questions that you would ask. Some will be asked here, and if there are many, then we can task our presenters with the questions later. So at the end of the webinar, we shall be requesting you to take a moment to evaluate the webinar and give us feedback. And then a certificate will be issued for participants who complete the evaluation. Right? So we began by tackling misinformation, disinformation in genetic biocontrol and life sciences. And then that was webinar number 1 under the Truth Under the Microscope series. Then we moved on to webinar 2, Trust by Design, communicating emerging technologies with confidence. And today we are focused on webinar 3, where we are tackling Truth Under the Microscope, checking claims and clarifying science for various audiences. The central theme of the Truth Under the Microscope series is trust, which is fundamental to scientific progress and innovation. So what informs this webinar series? Today's information environment enables rapid dissemination of scientific knowledge and equally rapid misinformation spread and also disinformation, especially in the age of artificial intelligence. Therefore, checking claims and clarifying science matters because different audiences have different levels of knowledge, experiences, needs, and ways of understanding information. Therefore, clear and accurate science communication helps ensure that people can make informed decisions without being misled. So when we sent out the call for this webinar, we sent out a pre-webinar assessment, which thank you for responding to the pre-webinar assessment. It found that 65% have not attended a similar webinar before, which makes this very, very timely. And we also received from you that 32% have not heard about the consortium before. And therefore, we are happy to let you know some of the work that the consortium does. So this webinar is designed to strengthen participants' ability to check claims and interpret scientific evidence. Having understood what misinformation, disinformation, malinformation, and fake news is, we want to then move further to strengthen participants' abilities to check claims, interpret scientific evidence, and communicate clearly to different audiences, including the public, media, policymakers, community leaders, and professional stakeholders. This session will combine practical guidance and examples, as well as audience engagement to help participants distinguish evidence-based information from opinion, misinformation, uncertainty, and oversimplification. And we've lined up a keynote speaker and panelists who will be able to take us through this. So this webinar provides a practical foundation to assess scientific claims and also tailor expectations for different audiences. That's why we're calling it Checking Claims and Clarifying Science for Various Audiences. It focuses on identifying credible sources, understanding uncertainty, avoiding jargon, addressing misconceptions respectfully, and presenting evidence in accessible formats. So the objectives of this webinar, we would like to help participants at the end of this webinar to understand why verifying scientific claims is essential for trustworthy communication. We would also like, at the end of the webinar, to help participants to recognize misleading, exaggerated, and unsupported claims. We also want them to be able to evaluate sources, evidence, methods, context, and uncertainty. We would also like to enable participants communicate science information clearly and accurately to different audiences, as well as responding constructively to misinformation and audience questions. And finally, helping to apply practical claim checking and science communication practices. So potentially, we hope that at the end of the sessions, participants will appreciate the importance of scientific information and identifying misinformation and misleading claims, critically evaluate scientific claims by examining the quality and the credibility of sources. We'd also like participants to be able to distinguish evidence from opinion and speculation, and also to be able to apply practical and simple fact-checking skills to investigate, verify scientific information before sharing it or communicating it. We would like participants to build confidence in evaluating scientific information, as well as promoting a culture of evidence-based communication. So in a nutshell, we would like then, if we do all this, then we will be building trust, and we will be reducing misinformation, we will be supporting informed decisions, as well as preventing misunderstanding, but also communicating science clearly and encouraging constructive dialogue. So that is why this discussion, this conversation matters a lot. We would like to help the various audiences, from the media to the students, to the journalists, to the policymakers and decision makers, to health workers, scientists and researchers. We would like these people groups to be able to receive segmented information that clearly communicates with them. So how do we foster a culture of evidence, and how do we check claims and clarify science for various audiences? Distinguished speakers and panelists, our partners and collaborators, and the organizing team, regulators in the room, communicators, journalists, editors, civil societies present, and all other participants. Thank you for making time to join this webinar and for committing to advancing informed dialogue. My name is Rosalia Omungo. I am the Chief Executive Officer of the African Genetic Biocontrol Consortium. And now it gives me pleasure to welcome our moderators of the day, Michael Simire. He's the editor. He's a science journalist, an award-winning science journalist, and editor-in-chief of Nigeria-based EnviroNews. And our co-moderator is Alana Fogarty. She is a senior analyst at the Johns Hopkins Center for Health and Security. Welcome on board, and welcome to all the participants. Let us give a round of applause to Alana and Simire as they join us.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Rosalia. Thank you for the introduction. You're all welcome to the today's webinar session. As you said, we are focused on a very important issue today, and we are looking at checking claims and clarifying science for various audiences, which she has listed the overview. She's talked about the objectives and several things about this session. We have lined up some speakers and panelists, and we're going to start our session right away. We don't want to waste time. Our keynote speaker is Musa Savadogo. Musa Savadogo is an experienced regulatory and environmental biosafety expert with over 13 years experience in biotechnology and genetically based vector control. He has supported African countries in biosafety regulation, environmental risk assessments, and development of regulatory frameworks for genetically modified mosquitoes and other biotechnology applications. He holds a PhD in applied biological sciences and has extensive experience in technical training, policy development, and international biosafety programs. Dr. Savadogo, you're welcome, sir. You can take the floor.
And just a quick reminder for everyone who might have joined late, we do have interpretation for this webinar. So you can select the appropriate language, either in English or French.
Thank you, Elena.
Yeah, bonjour tout le monde. Est-ce que vous voyez est-ce que tout le monde voit mon écran?
Oui, oui.
D'accord, très bien. Merci, monsieur le modérateur, pour cette belle introduction que vous avez voulu faire, une présentation que vous avez voulu faire de moi. Je voudrais aussi remercier les organisateurs de ce webinaire, avec à leur tête Dr. Willy Tonui et toute son équipe, d'abord pour la pertinence du thème choisi, à savoir la désinformation, la malinformation, qui est un phénomène vraiment important de notre temps, et pour m'avoir donné ce privilège d'ouvrir cette conversation en tant que keynote speaker. Je voudrais vraiment vous remercier pour cela. Je suis Moussa Savadogo, je suis du Burkina Faso, un pays, comme vous le savez, qui a été parmi les pionniers en Afrique à adopter les biotechnologies, aussi bien dans le domaine agricole que dans le domaine de la lutte contre les maladies, la lutte antivectorielle, et qui a eu une certaine expérience dans le déroulement donc de cette adoption-là. Et cela m'a donné une certaine expérience en termes de communication, en termes de misinformation, comme on dit, mésinformation, et en termes donc de fake news, Et mon expérience par rapport à ces éléments de communication, c'est aussi élargi à l'occasion de ma carrière de près d'une quinzaine d'années à Aouda Nepad, où j'étais en charge donc de la question environnementale, qui m'a donné l'occasion de parcourir ou de rencontrer beaucoup de nos partenaires africains et donc d'avoir eu l'expérience en ce qui concerne tous ces aspects de désinformation, de misinformation et de leurs conséquences. Donc aujourd'hui, pour introduire ce webinaire, je me situerai beaucoup plus dans un contexte plus large. Et ma conviction, c'est qu'il nous faut bâtir et construire une culture et une civilisation de vérification des faits. Voilà ce que je pense. Toutes les communications de ce webinaire doivent tendre à cet objectif, à cette ambition. Et ce webinaire lui-même se situe dans une stratégie. Il y aura d'autres événements, il y aura d'autres rencontres, il y aura d'autres actions qui vont progressivement préparer à la construction donc de cette culture de cette culture de vérification des faits. Pardon. Vous me voyez toujours? Qu'est-ce qui s'est passé? Can you see me?
Non, non.
Ah, c'est parti.
Appel-
Qu'est-ce qu'il y a? Can you see my screen still? What happened? Est-ce que vous voyez toujours
Yes.
mon écran? Non? Moi, je ne le vois plus.
Can you try to reopen the PowerPoint? Yes, it's back.
Oh. OK.
Not yet.
Mais
It's sliding across the screen, so I don't know.
oh, sorry about that. Sorry about that. So,
Okay, it's
c'est
back
bon?
now.
OK,
Oui,
je
c'est bon.
m'excuse, hein. Alors, la conversation d'aujourd'hui va donc s'intéresser à ces points. Nous allons d'abord revenir sur le problème, nous rappeler exactement l'importance du problème, et la persistance du phénomène, et nous allons voir les principes pour la vérification donc des fausses informations, pour laquelle nous avons tous une responsabilité civique, citoyenne. Et nous allons rapidement regarder quelques exemples d'effets néfastes dus justement à cette désinformation. Et nous allons conclure par donner quelques éléments pratiques et proposer des actions à mener justement dans le cadre de cette stratégie de construction de la culture de la vérification. Alors, pour bien nous rappeler, le phénomène de la désinformation et des fake news n'est pas un phénomène nouveau. La désinformation, la mésinformation sont un phénomène qui a toujours existé, qui existe aujourd'hui et qui va continuer à exister. Nous vivons aujourd'hui dans un écosystème informationnel un peu chaotique où presque tout le monde peut affirmer, faire une affirmation d'ordre scientifique. Et tout le monde également, n'importe qui, peut penser qu'il peut réagir, penser qu'il peut juger d'une information chaotique. Enfin, alors ça, c'est un problème parce que le public n'a plus de référence et a perdu toute sa capacité à pouvoir distinguer ce qui est vrai de ce qui est faux. Et ce problème a été reconnu, est aujourd'hui reconnu par toutes les grandes institutions internationales, et j'en ai cité quelques-unes ici. Et lors de leur rapport en 2025 du Forum économique mondial, on a classé la désinformation parmi les 5 plus grandes menaces mondiales les plus pressantes. Alors, ça veut dire quelque chose. Et la désinformation persiste toujours et elle s'accentue aujourd'hui avec l'arrivée des nouveaux outils de communication, les plateformes de communication sociale, les réseaux sociaux. Et pour cela, l'Afrique, en tant que continent avec la plus grande population de jeunesse, mais aussi avec le continent qui a le plus besoin de sciences et de technologies pour rattraper son retard, pour l'Afrique, le défi de la désinformation est encore plus accentué. Ces jeunes qui sont pleins de talent, qui sont pleins de créativité, aussi eux, les animateurs et les utilisateurs des réseaux sociaux, parfois sans distinction. Donc, à la fois, nous avons le potentiel et le besoin pour la science et la technologie, mais nous avons aussi intrinsèquement une population qui est réceptive par rapport à ces fake news et qui sape justement le fondement de la science. Donc, la seule solution, notre salut viendra de l'effort que nous allons mettre ensemble pour construire une civilisation, une culture de vérification des faits. D'où toute l'importance de l'atelier d'aujourd'hui sur le fact-checking. Alors, la vérification des faits en matière de science doit être vue comme une responsabilité citoyenne. Aucun domaine n'est épargné par le phénomène et lorsque des affirmations se répandent, que ce soit sur les effets des changements climatiques, que ce soit en matière de santé, que ce soit en matière de biotechnologie, les conséquences de cette désinformation se payent en prix de milliers de vies, en prix de milliers de pertes de moyens de subsistance et finalement, encore plus grave, en perte de confiance pour la science et pour les scientifiques. L'exigence donc des affirmations et sa pratique au quotidien doivent devenir une responsabilité citoyenne qui nous incombe à tous et pas seulement réservée aux scientifiques. On peut citer quelques exemples, hein, il y en a beaucoup, où la désinformation a produit donc des conséquences désastreuses. On se rappellera dans les années 2001-2002, lorsque la grande sécheresse s'est abattue sur l'Afrique australe, des gouvernements ont rejeté l'aide alimentaire venant des États-Unis sous prétexte que cette aide alimentaire contenant du maïs génétiquement modifié OGM, donc était qualifiée de poison, alors que les États-Unis mangeaient ce produit depuis déjà des dizaines d'années sans problème. Et là, près de 15 millions d'habitants, de personnes étaient en péril, étaient en danger de mort à cause donc de cette décision. Donc on peut voir que la désinformation peut devenir mortelle lorsque la seule base de décision des leaders, c'est justement cette désinformation. Vous vous rappelez aussi l'étude de Gilles Serralini en 2012 sur les rats pour le cancer. Et bien que cette étude ait été invalidée et rétractée, elle circule toujours sur les réseaux sociaux. Et pour certains, ça semble être des études nouvelles. Et ça continue justement à entretenir la peur des OGM. Dans mon pays, nous avons connu le coton BT qui a été rejeté pour des raisons non pas de la science, non pas de sécurité, mais parce qu'on a attribué faussement la longueur, le problème de la longueur de la file au gène BT. Le gène BT ne peut pas raccourcir, scientifiquement ne peut pas raccourcir la longueur de la fibre. Le problème était dû à un nombre insuffisant de retrocroisements de la variété portant justement cet événement avec nos variétés locales. Mais le problème a été déplacé de sorte que, même aujourd'hui encore, ça complique toute tentative de retour au coton bêté. Le problème des moustiques génétiquement modifiés, on en parlera, ou d'autres en parleront, qui est aussi un cas. Et toujours dans le registre des fake news, justement, présenter la décision du gouvernement du Burkina d'arrêter le projet de moustiques génétiquement modifiés, présenter cela comme une opposition frontale entre le président de la République et le philanthrope Bill Gates est une démagogie. C'est archi faux. Et là, vous voyez justement ces genres de messages qui circulent sur les réseaux sociaux. Et à l'interne, vous avez vu les réseaux sociaux, pour ne citer que quelques-uns, des gens qui avaient écrit que il remercie le capitaine, le président de la République, parce que depuis que le laboratoire de moustiques a été fermé, ils ont il y a moins de dengue au Burkina. Bon, juste ça. Regardez des laboratoires qui travaillaient sur Anopheles et la dengue qui est transmise par Aedes, ça n'a absolument rien à faire. Ça, c'est une allégation dangereuse. Mais ça circule, voilà. Alors, qu'est-ce que nous pouvons faire? Donc, notre salut, comme je l'ai dit, c'est de s'attaquer justement aux éléments qui vont nous permettre de bâtir une culture de vérification des faits. Qu'est-ce que c'est que la vérification des faits en matière de sciences? Je pense que les autres panélistes qui me suivront pourront davantage expliquer. Il ne faut surtout pas confondre la vérification des faits, par exemple dans le domaine politique, une déclaration politique, avec la vérification des faits au niveau scientifique. La vérification des faits au niveau politique, par exemple, c'est de dire ceci est vrai ou ceci est faux par rapport à une déclaration donnée où on peut tout de suite vérifier à partir donc d'une certaine matérialité. En matière de science, une affirmation tient compte de plusieurs critères, de plusieurs paramètres. Et il ne suffit pas de se demander est-ce que cela est vrai ou faux. Il faut se poser beaucoup de questions pour se remettre dans le contexte. Entre autres, qu'est-ce que cette étude dit exactement? Qu'est-ce qui a été affirmé? Quelles sont les preuves qui ont été avancées? Est-ce que les résultats ont été reproduits ailleurs? Est-ce que cette étude a été reproduite ailleurs de façon indépendante, etc., etc. Voilà toute une série donc de questions qui doivent pouvoir guider ceux qui ont la charge, et nous avons tous la charge, de faire des vérifications en matière de sciences. Mais il faut reconnaître qu'aborder ce travail, cet ensemble de critères n'est pas chose facile. Ça demande une certaine expertise, ça demande une certaine littératie scientifique, statistique, de l'honnêteté, des ressources et du temps. C'est pour ça, à la fin, en matière d'action, nous sommes en train de proposer qu'il y ait des réseaux, des consortiums où scientifiques et communicateurs vont travailler de façon en synergie pour essayer donc de faire ces vérifications. Mais en pratique, on peut résumer tout ceci en 3 ou 4, en 4 ou 5 questions. Une vérification efficace des affirmations en matière de sciences repose sur 5 piliers fondamentaux. Et de façon pratique, il va s'agir de vérifier le type d'étude qui a été réalisée, de vérifier si cette étude a été reproduite quelque part, de vérifier si les données de l'étude sont disponibles et accessibles, de vérifier qui tire profit de cette étude, de vérifier à quel point le langage même qui a été utilisé peut être certain ou peut être un signal vers une fausse affirmation ou pas. Et bien sûr, ces critères vont s'appliquer à toutes les affirmations, aussi bien celles qui sont pour lesquelles on n'est pas d'accord que celles pour lesquelles on est, qui sont favorables à nous. Alors, donc, par rapport à tout ça, à tous ces éléments, nous avons pensé qu'avec l'existence de ce consortium pour lequel nous adressons nos félicitations, nous avons pensé qu'il peut être un noyau autour duquel des acteurs, partenaires et institutions peuvent s'unir pour bâtir progressivement une culture de vérification. Et il y a donc des actions préliminaires à faire. Et parmi ces actions, nous encourageons premièrement le consortium et ses partenaires à entreprendre une étude systématique du phénomène de la désinformation en Afrique. Ça a été fait ailleurs. Nous en avons besoin en Afrique pour avoir des clarifications, des précisions, pour instaurer la base à partir de laquelle nous allons discuter avec les politiques pour asseoir une stratégie propre. Nous pensons également qu'il est important de mettre en place un réseau ou un consortium, comme je l'ai dit tout de suite, qui va réunir des scientifiques et des communicateurs et d'autres expertises pour essayer donc euh, de veiller, de faire la veille sur à propos donc des fausses informations en matière de sciences. Et il y a déjà une base. Le consortium peut s'appuyer sur un certain nombre de réseaux que le projet ABNE de Aouda Nepad avait mis en place il y a quelques années. Il y avait en outre, par exemple, le réseau des spécialistes ou des experts, des scientifiques en sécurité alimentaire, en environnement, en communication, et bien d'autres, et dans le droit. Il y avait tous ces réseaux-là avaient été déjà créés. Et justement, c'était pour permettre donc d'échanger sur des questions importantes scientifiques qui apparaissaient. Et entre-temps, ces réseaux sont un peu partis en léthargie. Et je pense que le consortium et ses partenaires peuvent s'appuyer déjà sur ces réseaux existants pour remettre du travail. Et, pardon. Encore. Et développer de la régulation.
Your time is
Sur,
getting up. The time is up.
Yeah.
Round up, sir.
OK. Développer de la régulation sur la désinformation. Développer des programmes, des curricula de
Dr.
formation
Sabadogo,
universitaire.
please round up. Your time is up.
Yeah. Alors voilà, c'était mon dernier, donc ma dernière diapositive. Et j'en termine pour dire les fausses affirmations et la désinformation ne peuvent pas être éliminées, mais leur influence sur les décisions peut l'être. Et cela va dépendre donc de l'habitude de nous demander chacun d'entre nous comment est-ce que cela a été fait, comment est-ce que cela a été, comment est-ce que a été publié, etc. Merci beaucoup. Merci.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sabadogo, for the insightful presentation. Yes, you're right. False claims and misinformation cannot be eliminated. And you talked about the effects, what they have done, that they have been very damaging to society, damaging to the economy. They've caused so many challenges over the years. They talked about the case of the GMOs, BT cotton, the GM mosquitoes in Burkina Faso, and several examples. We talked about claim checking in science. And you said that claim checking may not be the same as fact checking of politicians. And so many other enlightening and informative points you made here. Thank you very much, sir. We'll go to our next presenter. Our next presenter will be talking to us for 15 minutes. And that is Dr. Amelie Wamba. She's a biochemist and public health project management specialist with over 10 years experience in molecular biology, medical entomology, and malaria vector control. At the Innovative Vector Control Consortium, IVGCC, she supports ITM programs and works with governments, NGOs, and global partners to strengthen malaria control strategies. She specializes in science communication, stakeholder engagement, and translating complex research into actionable policy and practice. So today she's going to talk about, she's going to clarify science for various audiences in our presentation. Dr. Wamba, you are welcome. Are you there?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, thank you very much for giving me
You're
the
welcome.
floor, Mr. Moderator. Let me share my screen. Okay. So can you please confirm that you're seeing my screen?
I can see your screen.
All right,
Yes.
thank you very much. I'd like to welcome everyone to this webinar and thank you for the introductions. So I will be talking about how to, sorry, my slide is on the last slide. So I'll be talking on checking claims and clarifying science for various audiences. So the title of this webinar is Truth Under the Microscope because we want to go down to the details of how very tiny variations in the context or in the wording or even in the narration can change perception of the message that is being intended. So I would like to start by talking about the case in Burkina Faso. Most of us here must know Professor Diabate, who has done immense work in gene editing work, especially on modified mosquitoes, be it genetically or not. So I'm taking this example from 2019 because this is a very huge example of disinformation or misinformation. So calling something by what it is not brands it as something entirely different and really influences perception of that particular action or project. We would take this case on the 1st of July in IRSS in Burkina Faso. There was this project on modifying mosquitoes, but it wasn't genetically. It was just it was mostly sterile males and non-transgenic siblings that were used for survival, dispersal, and swarming. So this was a study that was a non-gene drive study on male and sterile mosquitoes. And the purpose of this was to study field behavior of mosquitoes. And it wasn't a malaria control trial. I'm putting down this point because it's really important to understand the purpose of this meeting and how it was later reoriented into another agenda. So this study was aimed to set limits, like the results were aimed to inform research, and therefore it was kind of an informative study on the potential of a particular tool in vector control and public health. So how does audience segmentation and message tailoring influence how it is perceived? So we have different stakeholder groups that we engage with. Initially, we talked about the people we communicate science to, because it's very important the language and methods you use to communicate to these various stakeholders. So we will talk about the local residents, for example, the people we call the communities. These people mostly are not educated. They don't have any specific knowledge or education on the topic you are communicating. So it's very important to factor that in the way you bring up the conversation. So local benefits, safety reviews participants. Here, scientists are studying mosquitoes designed to pass on a threat that may reduce mosquito spreading malaria. Work is tested step by step under safety checks. You'll notice that in this language, there is no technical terms, and you try at this level to break down all the information as much as possible while keeping a focus on the positive outcome of the trial for that particular community. So keeping a focus on how that would improve their lives gives them that sense of benefit, and they may also be more attentive to what you're saying because they see that there's something positive coming out of that particular communication or project. We also have media outlets. So this is what we call generally the fourth power, because they have a lot of reach on what is happening. So usually communicating to journalists, we would say, for example, research evaluates if a threat reduces vectors, distinguishes early sterile male field releases from full gene drive field efficacy. Some journalists have training in science communication, so it really depends on what field these media persons are from and how much of the technical knowledge they have, which means the information needs to be broken down further with respect to the person in question. We also have a very wide group, an important group, who are the regulators, that's the policymakers. Here, it's most about governments and, for example, public health officials and NMCPs. So communicating this to them has to come with a different kind of context where you focus on health relevance, on biosafety, on the cost, the ethics, and what are their options. Policymakers need options because they have to balance so many things, cost effectiveness and timelines. So I think that's very important to take into consideration when communicating with this particular group. So we also have peers and technical specialists, for example, scientists. Even though scientists may understand the context or the background of a particular technique or technology, it doesn't usually mean they understand the benefits or its applicability or its potential in a particular field, which means keeping in mind that in communicating to this particular group, you should still focus on how this technology could add value to ongoing problems where solutions are needed. I would like to talk about tackling difficult public questions. For example, every time you would mention a solution or a potential solution like gene drives or gene editing solutions, somebody will ask you, will these genetically modified mosquitoes spread uncontrollably across the borders? To be honest, this is a question that usually comes very often, and in your response, you have to acknowledge the concern. First, there is cause for concern. So acknowledging the concern means that this is an important question and it is completely reasonable to ask for this situation. For example, in case of travel, how do these mosquitoes get contained? Explain the safeguards. So now that you've acknowledged that it's a legitimate concern, you can explain that researchers rigorously evaluate mosquito movements, ecological risk, and monitoring plans prior to any releases. And lastly, you can state the evidence limits. So maintain complete honesty regarding the risk assessment. Evidence is collected step by step. No responsible scientist or communicator should claim a zero risk for anything. We also have a 4-step truth. That's the first correction framework. So when you're communicating, it doesn't matter which stakeholder, you have to lead with the truth, because the truth is a fact and it is verifiable and will always be the same. So if you say gene drive research is being evaluated in phases under strict regulatory oversight, that's a fact and that's the truth, because it can be verified, backed up with evidence. Address missing context. Missing context usually comes up with conspiracy theories and rumors and inaccurate facts. So for example, viral posts leave out context, early releases tested non-gene drive sterile male mosquitoes to study dispersal. So in this case, you would see that everybody can directly label this project as a gene drive project without checking the facts or anything. So the context has to be brought into it every time. And speaking to a particular stakeholder, it will help to be able to tell them that this is the context in which this claim has been made, forcefully or truthfully. State uncertainty and the limits. So every project, every operation has a level of uncertainty. It would be trust to give a measure of this uncertainty and how that is going to be to grow or reduce over time. For example, field survival findings evaluate mosquito performance. They do not estimate long-term malaria elimination. That is the uncertainty, and it helps to give a measure of the caution or precautions that are being taken in the implementation of such a project. Point to official sources. This is the fact checking. Give the people the opportunity to go and confirm what you are saying for themselves. For example, everybody knows that you can make a decision, but is it being made from an informed standpoint or not? That's the key word, informed decision-making. Our opinions usually are not based on on information or correct information, which is something to really stress out. I would move directly to community engagement and trusted messengers here, because I was talking about how you frame the message. So how can you effectively engage in the communities, for example, or in different stakeholder groups? There's a two-way dialogue where you can speak to somebody and then you listen to their questions and you address their concerns directly. Sometimes you need a trusted messenger pairing. For example, in communities, we have relay workers, we have health community workers who are already established in the communities and therefore are trusted and will be listened to. So when you pair with them, you already have a lead on gaining their ear to whatever you have to say. And also speaking in the local language will be a huge benefit. We have a teach back verification, which is an extrapolation of the second point, where the community leaders or the health workers can also teach the communities in the local language what you have explained to them and broken down as much as possible, so that the facts can be translated to the local language and improve understanding. So that means there should be a catalog or a way to break down gene drive technical terms to every local language where there's supposed to be engagement. That would be very helpful. So we also have real world verification, like the traffic light model. So I usually recommend this because you have the green, which are established facts. This is the truth. This is verifiable. Every time it's going to be the same. And then you have emerging or projections. This is when you use data available to project what can happen or not. That's a probability. So there is a chance that it happens or it doesn't happen. That should be very clear because this is where the uncertainty begins. You have to tell clearly, communicate clearly how likely each of the different projections are to happen. And then you have misleading claim. Usually there's just people who use their position, their audience, the audience they have to give misleading information that is not backed by facts or claims. Here we've had several examples, and this has led to a lot of reputational damage that would take a lot of effort and time to correct or to manage. I would like to stop there with this slide saying clear science communication is not about hiding complexity. It is about sharing evidence, respecting community wisdom, and navigating uncertainty together. Applying this to the context of your community engagement, you have to tell the people that this is a complex technology. Like in the case of Gene Drive, it's very scientific, it's technical, and be patient to break down as much as possible to let them know how this is going to impact their livelihood, their health, their community well-being, and share the evidence with them. No matter how complex it is, break down as much as possible, and also respect the wisdom of navigating these uncertainties together. Let them know that they are legitimate in being uncertain about the outcome of this particular project, and continuously reassure them at every engagement opportunity that the uncertainties are manageable and give them the correct probabilities as they evolve. I will be happy to take any questions, and thank you very much for your attention. Over to you, moderator.
Thank you very much, Dr. Emily, for your presentation. Michael, would you like to present the next speaker for the group?
Okay, I think the next speaker is John Conem.
Wonderful. John, over to you.
John is an international advisor, specializes in biotechnology policy, biosafety regulation, intellectual property, and research programs management. He has over 30 years of experience supporting African biotechnology and biosafety initiatives, including the PBS, the Program for Biosafety Systems in Africa. He has advised organizations including AFPRI, FAO, UNEP, and the Gates Foundation. He has authored and co-authored over 50 peer-reviewed publications. Over to you, John.
Well, big thanks to the organizers of this webinar series. And thank you, Mr. Moderator, for this generous introduction. And it's a pleasure and an honor, of course, to speak for the next 10 to 15 minutes to such a distinguished audience. Really great pleasure to be here. And my task, of course, is a lot easier because I'm the third speaker and I will be standing on the shoulders of giants, Amélie and Musa, who have laid out the main issues so clearly. But I would like to add a few comments and experiences from 3 decades of involvement in biosafety capacity building, predominantly in sub-Saharan Africa, and the types of debates and the types of lessons that we've learned in promoting well-informed and science-based decision-making in agricultural biotechnology. There are several publications already, and I'll show one towards the end of my presentation, that have also laid out these parallels between the agriculture biotechnology debate and the current debate on gene drives and the use of gene drives in combating malaria. And I think indeed there are many lessons to be learned. I will be focusing on the role of regulators in public debate, building trust, and communicating science and regulatory decision-making in order to build trust. So I hope you can hear me clearly. You can also see my screen. If not, just raise your hand or shout, and I'll pause there. I'm using a case study briefly here from Southeast Asia, so I'm sure I will not be offending or targeting anyone in the public today. And this is something that actually took place during training workshops almost a decade ago in Southeast Asia, which I was one of the presenters and one of the organizers. And a delegation from a Southeast Asian country came with a long list of questions, all related to the likely impact of genetically modified maize, insect-protected maize, in their ecosystems, in their agricultural ecosystems, before they were actually able to release that technology in their countries. And what's interesting is that this long list of questions, especially on non-target organisms, so the organisms that may be affected negatively by the insect protection technology, BT genes, were based on legitimate science and legitimate regulatory queries. But what we also see in the debate on information, misinformation, and disinformation is that studies and regulatory findings. Oops. Is my screen still on?
Yes.
I'm still sharing? Okay, because something changed on mine. Sorry. That these regulatory queries are often presented and interpreted with a particular and very negative spin. And especially when it comes to the impact of BT maize, insect-protected maize, on non-target species such as caterpillars and butterflies. Doom scenarios and extinction scenarios are often presented. And you may or may not be familiar with the controversy that broke out many years ago, say 1999, when a team of scientists tried to explain and provide evidence for the fact that monarch butterflies, which is an iconic butterfly in the United States and also in South American countries, was negatively affected by the large-scale planting of genetically modified insect-tolerant maize in the American Corn Belt as well as elsewhere. And also in this study, and especially in the headlines that were created based on this study, these catastrophe scenarios made really good headlines and created widespread concern. I still recall that same year that a colleague walked into my office who was not involved in biotechnology and biosafety capacity development, saying, "Look, John, this is the smoking gun for agriculture biotechnology, and I think you're done by now." And well, luckily that was not the case, but it did indeed create lots of problems in our work, because those concerns and catastrophe scenarios were reflected in regulatory policies and risk assessment procedures, as well as decision making in many of the African countries where we work and still work and work back then. And when it comes to risk assessment, for example, the regulatory bar was raised so high and applicants were asked to do all kinds of non-target impact studies, whereas, of course, a regulator and a scientist can ask a unlimited amount number of questions. But the key is, of course, will it actually inform safety, environmental safety, or human and animal health safety, or is it just nice to know? So we took those regulators from this particular country. Oh, this is one headline that was actually based on that 1999 study on monarch butterflies. This actually comes from Cornell's University newsletter itself. The headline that was made is, you can see toxic pollen from widely planted genetically modified corn can kill monarch butterflies. So you see the use of terms such as toxic and kill and genetically modified, of course, that made a very clear causal link. But closer reading made very clear that this was actually not the case. But still, the damage was already done, and it has led to lots of regulatory delays in countries where we've worked. So how do we respond to such regulatory questions and issues? Well, we actually would go back to basics. And what is important here is that, of course, we would start with a bit of a fun exercise showing the differences between non-GM and GMAs, and showing that maize has been modified for over hundreds, if not thousands of years by human beings, and that the maize that we know right now, the GM maize, is, of course, a result of decades of plant breeding. And over those decades, we have accumulated knowledge that actually informs biosafety reviews and decision making as well. We know a lot about the environmental impacts of crop plants generally, and by now, following 30 years of planting of genetically modified crops, we know a lot about the impacts of genetically modified crop plants. And this is all laid down in regulatory reviews in Europe, in the US, in many African countries already, and published in peer-reviewed journals. The particular genes that are used in the maize, the Bt genes that encode for proteins, the cry proteins that confer insect tolerance, may or may not have environmental impacts on beneficial species such as butterflies. Well, this has been analyzed and documented meticulously as well, and also published in peer-reviewed journals. So we would take regulators, first of all, step by step through the general impacts of crop plants, of genetically modified crop plants, and also take them through the evidence of what we already know about the specific proteins that were active in the GM maize. Then, thirdly, what is important here is that there's so much accumulated knowledge about the behavior of insect species already, which is relevant not only to the GM crop debate, but also to the debate on gene drives and the safety of gene drives in combating diseases. Entomologists in Southeast Asia, but also in Africa, are extremely well trained, often have PhDs and overseas training from distinguished universities, and in my experience have played an essential role in informing debates and informing regulatory decision making in African countries before these Bt crops such as cotton and maize were released in African countries. In addition to that, there's a wealth of knowledge in Africa as well as elsewhere on the comparator scenarios. What are the environmental impacts of conventional agronomic practices? And in the case of the Southeast Asian country, that was a bit of an eye-opener as well, because in that particular country, the current practice was actually to wipe out insect pests by widespread application of insecticides. So we also took them through the environmental impacts of current agronomic practices and insecticide applications, and also made it very clear what impacts that has on non-target insect species, and especially on beneficial insect species and butterflies, caterpillars, and so on and so forth. And based on a systematic and iterative review of those general building blocks, we were able, with those regulators, to define realistic scenarios, as well as messages based on those realistic scenarios that would feed into regulatory decision making. So we did not only train regulators on building those scenarios and coming up with science-based and well-informed regulatory decisions, but also made sure they were able to present and defend such decisions towards their politicians, as well as the media, as well as the public at large. So here's a diagrammatic picture of the types of questions that we would take them through, often with a simple matrix where those questions could be addressed for specific genetically modified crops and technologies. First, identify the risk, then identify the likelihood of a risk to turn into harm, the risk estimation, what is the level, what is the exposure to the environment, and then, well, so what? What are the consequences? And what is the certainty or uncertainty with which we can determine the likely consequences of a certain GM crop release? So lots of these questions are relevant to the discussions on gene drives in mosquitoes as well. So of course, those trainings never focused on risk assessment only. We presented it in a comprehensive approach to regulation that also includes communication and consultation, informing the public and strengthening citizens' right of access to information, and making government information more accessible and usable. In Africa, there's a growing number of national biosafety authorities who make information available on field trials, on imports of genetically modified food and feed commodities, for example. And they also make that application dossiers available online, as well as in public libraries and other places for the public to consult and come up with comments before a regulatory decision is taken. Engage with citizens and on policy and service delivery. National biosafety authorities in many countries either reach out in public places and interact with citizens in agricultural fairs, not just in capital cities, but also increasingly in more remote rural areas. And this is a practice that should be supported at all times. Overall, making government more consultative and participative in biotechnology has been an important goal of our work, with some mixed lessons and mixed successes, I would say. But overall, the role of the regulators and the biosafety authorities, especially in African countries, is essential to building trust and in combating misinformation and disinformation. What is key at all stages of regulatory reviews? Come again?
Round up.
Yes, this is my This is my final slide. I would like to stress that compliance is key in building trust with diverse stakeholders group at every stage of the regulatory continuum. Make sure reviews are detailed and also communicated to the public at large. And by making sure compliance on behalf of the applicant as well as by the authority itself is essential in building trust with the politicians that have to support you, with policymakers, as well as with the general public. Also invest in a relationship with the regulated community, the researchers, the private sector, food retailers, and so on and so forth, to make sure that compliance becomes the norm and not the exception, so that controversies on unauthorized releases or unauthorized consumption and planting of genetically modified organisms will be minimized. Finally, I would just like to make a plug for a former colleague of mine, Hector Comada, who has published on the lessons that can be learned from debates on genetically engineered crops and the relevance to gene drive deployment. This is just a journal article that I would like to encourage everyone to read and analyze. Lots of good lessons that can be learned from agriculture, biotechnology, and biosafety that will be relevant to the debate of this webinar series as well. So thank you for your attention, and back to you, Mr. Moderator. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, John. Thank you. We appreciate your presentation. Well received. We'll go to our next presenter right away. And our next presenter is Dr. Gilmore Munhenga. He's a principal medical scientist and a malaria researcher. Dr. Munhenga is a South African NRF-rated medical entomologist and principal medical scientist at the National Institute for Communicable Diseases and senior researcher at the WITH Research Center for Malaria. He has over 10 years experience in malaria vector research, vector control, and community engagement. His research focuses on innovative approaches to malaria control, including the sterile insect technique targeting Anopheles arabiensis. He's also actively involved in postgraduate training, research, and regulatory engagement. Over to you, Dr. Munhenga. Are you there, sir? Is Dr. Munhenga there?
Yeah, Givemo is coming on board shortly. Simire and Alana, we can take one question as we wait for him. Thank you.
Sure thing. I think overall it's been wonderful discussion, just hearing all the different perspectives from regulatory affairs, science, communication, and biotechnology, and just getting those different perspectives and examples. And I think in general, from everyone who was able to participate in the survey, the audience was really interested in how do I check a scientific claim quickly? How do I explain complicated science simply without distorting it? How do I communicate uncertainty? How do I respond to misinformation without amplifying it? And how do I adapt the message for different audiences? And while we wait for Dr. Givemore, I think I'll just take the opportunity to ask the speakers right now one question. So I think one question that definitely came up in terms of addressing uncertainty, or I think we will start with, how should we respond to a claim that is technically correct, but presented in a misleading way, for example? Would one of our speakers like to tackle the question first?
La question, Alana, la question c'était, on peut répéter un peu parce qu'il y avait un écho quand même. Oui, je pense, non? Moi, j'avais un écho, je n'ai pas très bien. Voilà, la question non plus, hein, c'est ça?
Sorry, Musa, can you translate that into English, please?
Alana, can you repeat the question, please? There was an echo, so I didn't pick it clearly.
Yes, understood. How should we respond when there's a claim that is technically correct, but maybe presented in a misleading way?
Oui, ceci est fréquent d'ailleurs, des affirmations qui sont correctes et qui sont présentées de façon erronée. Euh, alors, c'est la même chose parce que c'est présenté de façon erronée, peut-être à dessein ou déformé. Donc, c'est à dessein pour certainement nuire. Et je pense qu'il faut rétablir la bonne façon de communiquer, rétablir la vérité. Voilà, je pense qu'il faut rétablir la vérité et certainement utiliser des voix crédibles et par exemple, des scientifiques ou l'Académie des sciences chez nous pour rétablir cette vérité-là dans leur communication. Voilà, je pense que c'est comme ça qu'il faut le faire. Et ça arrive très souvent d'ailleurs, ça arrive très souvent d'ailleurs, oui. Peut-être que les autres panélistes peuvent ajouter.
Amélie, perhaps?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Please, can you reiterate the question for me, please, Alana?
Yes. The question was, how should we respond when a claim is technically correct? So the information being presented is correct, but it might be presented in a misleading way. So how should how should we target responses that are true, but it could be interpreted in a misleading way to different communities?
Thank you very much. That's very interesting because it happens very, very often. I can take a simple example of translating a message. We have gene drive in English and in French, but when you say gene drive in English, in French, it will say forçage génétique, which is a very, very, very negative interpretation of that particular word. So to package it, as you say, it has to be modification génétique or transmission génétique. That's a typical example. And you can see that the fact is right. Everything is correct. The messaging is correct. But the perception in the way it is packaged and explained to people is very different from what is intended. So I think that communicating should be a holistic package where both the information and the packaging should come together. And that should be tailored to the audience in front of us, which means the same message can have an infinite number of ways of saying it depending on who you're saying it to. And that should always come first in communication. Thank you.
Thank you very much. John, do you have any words that you'd like to share?
Yeah, just a quick addition, trying to So at least people can see me when I speak. And yeah, this is really, in my view, one of the biggest challenges that we face. I mean, outrageous claims are a lot easier to deal with than those that have roots in science, but are given a spin that really makes it hard to address as regulators, even as scientists, and which really necessitates a this back to basics approach, and really dissect, well, what claim is made here, what is it based on, and what do we know to actually confirm or dismiss the catastrophe scenario that's often depicted as a result. So that's one thing, of course, in regulatory risk assessment. One way to address these issues. In communication, I think over time in the work I've been contributing to is we stopped trying to address each and every claim that was made by stakeholder groups, somewhat loosely based on science, but given a negative spin, and instead make sure that other trusted stakeholder groups, as well as regulatory authorities and other trusted authorities and ministries in the countries where we're active, actually come up with their own communication programs backed by government in many cases, and come up with a steady stream of factual and objective information, of course, as much as possible, to actually inform the public without taking issue or without causing a debate with every single claim that was made by the popular media, printed media, whatever. So I think the communication strategy has to be determined as well.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. And thank you to all of our panelists for answering that question. And I think we can really take away that taking complex scientific information and just being able to translate that research and evidence in a way that communities can understand and trust is very important, and not only within communities, but also how that gets translated into policy and practice as well. And definitely a fitting topic for today. I just want to take a moment before we have our final panelist discussion by Dr. Givmore, how today is World Malaria Day, and just wanting to, again, it feels very fitting that we're having this conversation today and we're talking about the importance of translating science, translating research, and that evidence, and being able to communicate it in very effective ways for different audiences. And so without further ado, I would like to pass it on to my co-moderator, Michael, to introduce our final speaker for today's webinar session.
Thank you, Alana. I introduced him earlier. Do I reintroduce him again? Dr. Givmore Muhenga is a South African NRF-rated medical entomologist and principal medical scientist at the National Institute for Communicable Diseases and senior researcher at the WITS Research Institute for Malaria. He has over 10 years experience in malaria vector research, vector control, and community engagement. His research focuses on innovative approaches to malaria control, including the sterile insect technique targeting Anopheles arabiensis. He is also actively involved in postgraduate training, research, and regulatory engagement. Obviously, Dr. Givmore is an expert in malaria research, and it will be an honor for us to tap from his knowledge from his knowledge this afternoon. Over to you, Dr. Givmore.
Thanks, Michael, for that kind introduction. So I think I really wanted to share with you colleagues how at times science is affected by misconception and misinformation and things like that. So I'll try by all means to keep relevant and to have practical solutions or practical examples on how things can actually go wrong. So I thought I would present a practical perspective, especially what we faced when we were implementing a fairly novel project, which the community at first didn't see it that way. So I think if I share with that and give you my recommendations and my thoughts on how best communication can be done based on the experience I had. So when we started this project, so we are implementing a project called the sterile insect technique. So it actually involves rearing mosquitoes in thousands, and you are sterilizing these mosquitoes, and you are going to the community and say, we are now controlling mosquitoes, but at the same time, you are releasing mosquitoes. So it was quite an awkward situation for us because it raised a lot of social, ethical, and regulatory sort of concern even from the regulators because they have never heard of such that you can rear mosquitoes to control mosquitoes and release mosquitoes to control. Yeah. So what really stuck to us is when we started making sure that the community, we were working together with the community. So it is essential that you community participates right from the beginning before you even start releasing your first mosquito. You need to have sort of participation. So in actual fact, it breeds you trust, and it also has this question of the scientific evidence. At times, doesn't really resonate with people. You can't just tell them that this technology happened in Sudan, this technology happened in Burkina Faso, so it should happen here. So you need to walk with them by hand. What is also interesting is the issue of language. Not only the language, but if you look at the tone when you are there and the way you are presenting, is your language appropriate? Are you using the local language so that some aspects are not lost in translation? Are you giving the right tone? Are you being aggressive, or you are just using a tone which make people really understand? What also works is actually if you are using, in your explanation, you use visuals, you use local examples. Like for the sterile insect technique, they told us that no, when you want to communicate this, we always practice this when our cattle crow is full of cattle. We sterilize the male bull so that it doesn't keep on giving, fertilizing the females. So your technology, can you please explain it in such a way? So this is when we're working with the communities now. And what was also important was that when you engage the different levels, if you are talking to the community, the way you talk to the community is way different to the way you are talking to a professional audience. Like we have to go and present this to a technical audience. How do you present such information? And also when you're looking at policymakers, what are the end goals which these policymakers are interested in? If you talk to them in terms of reducing malaria burden, it resonates with them, then you start telling them this technology is going to do exactly that what you are talking about. That comment I can give is one which was being discussed recently is the misconception. So when we talked about releasing mosquitoes into the environment, there is so much fear that what is really going to happen. We are already struggling with mosquitoes, but you are coming to us and you are telling us we really want to release mosquitoes into the environment. So we needed to face that. It's a reality. We need to face that. And how do we address that? These fears cannot spread into the community uncontrollably. And you also need to do that in a respectful way. If there are certain members of the community who are not understanding, don't be aggressive. Just try to look at appropriate examples and don't just dismiss that, no, a majority of group have understood, so why are you not understanding? That single individual can influence the community and can influence the whole country for it to not embrace your technology. So what I did here is that when we started, really, it was about how do we break this barrier for this technology. So we also learned from other technology. This technology was tried in India and in the other Asian countries, and it was not embraced. What did we learn from there? It was how the communication was done. Then if you go to the other end of the spectrum, this technology was successful in a country like Brazil. What really lessons can be learned from there, and how can this be given? Yeah. So public acceptance in any new technology can be a barrier for acceptance of that technology. And acceptance is dependent on the knowledge and understanding of the project and the technology, and also the benefits it brings. So when you're communicating, those are some of the key areas you need to focus on. So from our side, what we really did is, what worked for us is we really had proper dialogue with different stakeholders. We looked at the communities in general. We understood their concern. We looked at the community leaders. We looked at the technical people. We engaged the radio stations. We engaged policymakers. We engaged the government. We engaged the various research teams, which ended up sort of understanding what strategies we can use. So based on this information we got, we say this might not be enough. Why can't we do a proper study where we do? So we did a CAP survey just to understand the knowledge, attitude, and practices in this particular area we are targeting, so that we really dive deeper into the real concerns of people. So that was sort of our first step we did. Then after this, this is when we got very insightful information from the community. So what the community told us that, this community, they love their culture. This community, they've got a certain genre of music that if you say anything in that, using this music, every Jack and Jill, every person in the community will start lending an ear to understand. So what we did is actually we, working with the community, we developed a song which is called Maskandi. So we called it Maskandi Experience. We offered them that Maskandi experience. The beat and everything was Maskandi, but the message was on this new technology, the sterile insect technique. So what we really, the results we got were actually amazing. So in terms of is the best way you can tell us things. We really appreciate that. Even the experts we were dealing with told us that I see my network is unstable. So the lesson we actually learned from this exercise was that repetition of aspects, because in a song we are repeating a familiar genera, use of local language, and unpacking technical topic was very memorable to them. And it gave the community sort of a two-way space and community dialogues, questions, and a lot to discuss about this science which we're bringing to the community. And it was really wonderful in terms of the outcomes we got. Then we actually didn't end there. There were some sections, because this was a whole community. When we did these dialogues and everything, they told us that no, but you guys have got this song. This community, they like their radio. There are sort of radio shows which are done and stories which are told on radio. So what we did now is we engaged the local radio station. We asked them to develop a story based on this technology, putting a mosquito as a person character, the technology as something different. Then we played these songs on community radio stations, and it was a hit in terms of they were waiting for that slot where the story was being told, and it made people really, in terms of reach, I think about 95% of the people were exposed to this, and the knowledge, the increase in knowledge was actually amazing again, when we looked at this technology. Then the other one, again, during Malaria Day, we engaged all the local schools, primary schools, secondary schools, and tertiary schools to have a competition on developing a drama which is based on the technology. And when we played this drama during the Malaria Day, it's amazing. After that, people were really imitating this character, a mosquito character, an SIT technology character, and this has spread all around the community. So what we can learn from this is that normally if you work with the community and if you involve them in something, it's rare for them not to embrace that thing in the community. And it also unpacks any complex scientific information you might have. Then in terms of the results, it was actually amazing that before our CAP survey, in terms of knowledge of this technology, it was around 10 to 20%. But when we finished all these engagement processes, when we did a follow-up survey, 85% of the people knew about the project and really understand what the technology was about. And in terms of the attitude, most people were fearful about releasing mosquitoes into an environment. And the sterilization effect, we end up also being sterile. But after our engagement, our community engagement and liaising with the community, the attitude increased to 91%. And in terms of acceptance, 97% of the community where we are working have accepted this technology, and we're actually uploading this technology as a field trial, which is quite sort of amazing. So in short, I could have said a lot, but in short, what really came out all of this is that when you are doing engagement for the community, you should start with people's concern. Don't go to the conclusions, but start with the conclusion. So open audience concern, the concerns from the audience, and the use of local language and their preferred language was essential in presenting evidence to them. Then we used trusted people. We used the chiefs, we used the headmasters, we used teachers, we used the respected members of the community, we used faith healers. So it really helped us in engaging this community. Another aspect is they make it culturally familiar, make this technology familiar to people, use their culture, use whatever is important in that. Then never shy away from responding to misconception. Acknowledge the concern, then look for specific way on how you can address this by presenting evidence. Like I told you, we talked to them about what happened in Brazil. We talked to them what happened in India when things were not handled properly. Then the other issue is the two-way dialogue. Don't go and impose things to the community. Always use community dialogue sessions. We're doing community meetings, key informant interviews, we're doing cross-sectional surveys to understand what can actually be done with this community to do this. Then obviously we had also this closing the loop, where we now publish the facts and maintain feedback channels, and also report back on the community on how things were progressing. So I think for me, this might be a perfect way to also try to unpack such complex technology, especially the gene drive issues we are now faced with, the use of biocontrol methods we are now faced with. So I think that those are some of the things I can share with you guys, but I'm willing to take any questions if they are, so that we can discuss further this issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gilmore. That was very enlightening. I took note of the point you made. You talked about taking into consideration people's concern, use of the local language. They use their trusted people like the chiefs and the faith healers, and utilize their cultures, acknowledge that they are concerns. These are very major points in terms of community engagement. Thank you very much, sir. We'll go to our next stage. I think we up to a question and answer session. Alana, would you handle this?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
While we wait for people to post their questions in the chat, and remember, you can post your questions in English or French. If there's a specific panelist you'd like to have your question addressed, you can specify that as well. I think I'll start the first question, Dr. Givmore. You were wanting to explain some more information and further discussion. I guess one question to continue that conversation is, when people hear the different terms such as gene drive, gene editing, genetic modifications, or synthetic biology, what do they most often misunderstand?
So from the experiments I get, the moment you start, especially from a community perspective, the moment you start talking about a gene, it gives a certain impression about changing the way things are. But if you now go to them and say, do you know that when you want to breed your cattle, you sometimes borrow your neighbor's uh, bull, which has got the characters that you want. So when we are talking about genes and we are using this gene drive technology, all we are simply doing is we are looking for this specific nice character. In this instance, this character which prevents malaria, mosquitoes to carry malaria from one person to the other. So we are taking this nice gene from this mosquito. Then we want to put this gene into sort of your cattle crow. We want to drive this gene into your cattle crow so that you produce these nice kettles, which is the vision you want. So normally, when you're talking about this term, make them relevant to the situations they are used to. Don't be too technical. Of course, when you're dealing with a technical audience or a professional audience, it's a different scenario. There you have to be specific. You have to really unpack what a gene is or what gene drive is. You also have to be truthful. Don't shy away from the naked truth. If there's something which is not very understood or which science is not yet proven, say it in that meeting and say how you are going to overcome those uncertainties. So that's how I would answer it.
Thank you very much. Yes, absolutely. Very important to be able to tailor the message, actually form relationships with the community and engage with the community. And I think your examples really really blend into some of the discussions that Dr. Emily was talking about in her presentation. So Dr. Emily, I have a question for you that I would love your opinion on. We hear the terms communicating to communities and engaging with communities. Can you describe more about what the difference between communicating to the communities and engaging with the communities? Are there any differences? Can you provide some light on that?
Thank you very much, Alana. I would like to say I believe there's a difference because communicating usually comes across as you saying something, usually either them reading it somewhere or like it's a one-way kind of flow, whereas engaging is more of a bilateral exchange where you say something and then you listen to them and then you clarify. And so I would say there's a very big difference in communicating and engaging someone. So I would recommend engaging people when it comes to, for example, gene drive technology, because we already come from a complex concept. So there's a need to go through the back and forth, breaking down, and also, like my colleague said, addressing fears, because the engagement is mostly to understand what is most important or most relevant for that community and how to address it. Your communication could be addressing a fear that doesn't even exist in that particular community. So identifying it is only through engaging with them and then continuous exchanges that would lead to alleviating the fears.
Thank you very much. I think continuing the conversation with communicating and even addressing potential uncertainties, or if there are other uncertainties that are still exist. I have a question for John. How can policymakers communicate difficult decisions honestly when there are still uncertainties that exist?
Yeah, I think, again, important question, and may not be a 100% answer to this, because it's never easy. Also because in a growing number of countries, I must say, policymakers and regulators are also called to court, because activist groups or other stakeholders are actually suing regulatory authorities over decisions they have made with all good and regulations of a country. And then, of course, stating in court that no technology is 100% safe, and there's no such thing as 100% safety, and uncertainty is always a key factor. That doesn't work really well with judges. So once again, we have to make sure that in our messaging, we can clearly state how innovation and new technologies provide incremental benefits to current practices, and how, for example, genetically modified maize leads to fewer or lower insect damage in the field, but will also reduce the presence of mycotoxins on harvested maize, which is a known cancer-inducing substance. I'm talking about well, the term escapes me now, but damaged maize is prone to fungal infestations as well, which leads to cancer in human beings when they consume it in times of hunger or famine, for example. And so clearly stating how a new technology, a new innovation actually provides benefits over current practices is a way of stating the benefits without denying that it's 100% safe, or that it's going to work with 100% safety, because we do not know that in current times either. So we can improve on what we know, but we can never be 100% sure. Yeah. And those messages also, we've conveyed them to farming communities and rural communities as well. And the funny thing that once happened in Malawi actually was towards the final session of a consultation around genetic modified cotton. A farmer, I think he was approaching 90 years of age, was waving his stick at all of us saying, look, this is the last consultation I'm going to attend with you guys. If you pay my allowances or not, next time I show up, I want a bag of seeds or 2 bags of seeds, and start planting this thing you've been harping about for so many years. So that could be an unintended consequence as well. So yeah, you have to engage and engage frequently, but there's limitations to that as well. People do get impatient sometimes. I see Musa has his hand raised as well here.
Oui, je voulais juste, avec votre permission, dire que c'est une question extrêmement importante. Euh, euh, de plus en plus, la science se développe, les technologies se développent à une vitesse extraordinaire, telle que aussi bien la communication que la régulation n'ont pas le temps vraiment de se développer pour suivre la vitesse. Et de plus en plus, il va falloir que nous puissions nous y faire aux décisions sous incertitude. Et là, c'est un point très important qu'on a soulevé et je pense que c'est l'un des points aussi qui doit pouvoir être des points d'objectifs de concentration et de travail pour tous ceux qui interviennent dans le renforcement des capacités, dans les politiques aujourd'hui. Il faut intégrer la décision sous incertitude comme en étant un élément très important. Parce que même aujourd'hui, on est obligé de prendre, par exemple, une décision sur l'intelligence artificielle, mais il y a beaucoup d'incertitudes. On a été obligé de prendre une décision pour le Covid, mais avec beaucoup d'incertitudes. Donc, de plus en plus en train de... Et moi, je voudrais suggérer justement au consortium et aux partenaires que ceci soit pris en compte dans les priorités après. Et le tout, une fois de plus encore, c'est comment est-ce que nos autorités font confiance à ceux qui viennent leur parler. Là, la question est là. Nos autorités doivent pouvoir donc faire confiance à leurs scientifiques, aux experts qui leur donnent des conseils par rapport à ces questions-là. Merci.
Thank you, Musa. Really appreciated your insight. And one thing I also really appreciated from your presentation was there's that civic obligation. You know, everyone has to play a role in about communication, communicating the truth. And one question I have for you, when we think about our civic obligation of how we communicate science, communicate research, what are some red flags that audiences should look for when someone makes a technological or scientific claim? Musa, I believe you are still muted, but I was interested in hearing your insight on what red flags that audiences should look for when someone makes a technological or a scientific claim, given we have that civic obligation to be able to communicate the evidence, the research, the science appropriately.
Oui, c'est pas toujours évident. Ce n'est pas toujours évident parce que pour pouvoir, disons, apprécier, il faut prendre du temps pour étudier justement la personne, quels sont les intérêts de la personne, quelles sont ses motivations, quelles sont ses qualifications. Et je pense que ça, ce sont les éléments aujourd'hui qui sont vraiment importants parce qu'on est dans un monde où la désinformation est une stratégie. C'est une stratégie de domination, c'est une stratégie géopolitique et c'est beaucoup de choses à la fois. Donc, je pense qu'il y a les éléments clés, vraiment, c'est essayer de retrouver et d'apprécier l'affiliation, les intérêts qui motivent la personne qui est en train donc, de faire ces affirmations. Et avant même de savoir exactement le contenu de cette affirmation, est-ce que scientifiquement, ça a pu être donc éprouvé par d'autres Et l'avis des experts aussi est très important dans ça. Voilà ce que je peux dire, peut-être pas de façon. Merci.
Thank you very much, Musa. Dr. Givmore, do you have anything else you'd like to add to conversation?
Yes. So for me, the red flags I would advise people to look for is, when a claim is being not made properly, you will see on the presentation there are no specific numbers being given on either the efficacy of the technology or the comparison between technologies, and you will see that maybe the technology is being compared by a traditional method, but they are not being specific on what technology is being referred to. And they can also claim that it gives a 99% improvement, but they don't give you a baseline. Where are they measuring it from to have that? So then, from a scientific perspective, you can just see there is no comparison with peer-reviewed work. The results are only from one specific company which is only producing that. So those are some of the red flags one has to look for, both from a scientific perspective and from a general perspective.
Thank you very much, both. We are nearing the end of our webinar session, and I would like to pose a question to all the panelists who wish to answer. Where do you think we most commonly fail when communicating science to the public? And if you could take away one practical habit or give a practical habit for our participants from today's discussion, what would you want that to be? So again, I'll just reiterate the question. Where do you think we most commonly fail when communicating science to the public? And if our audience members could take away one practical habit from today's discussion, what would that be? Dr. Emily, I see that you are ready to contribute.
Thank you. For me, it would be that we usually assume that the people we are talking to know or something about what we are talking about. So we assume they have preliminary information, which usually creates a gap in their understanding of what we are trying to say. So I would say the takeaway is to tailor the message to the person in front of you and make no assumptions. So give the full information without any assumptions with respect to your audience. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Emily. Dr. Givmore?
Yeah, so for me, I think where most scientists fail is the use of jargon. I think we discussed in length about when you are discussing and you start from nowhere, start talking about gene drive technology. You have already failed. You should start with more simple terms and things like that, and you progress until you come to the correct term. I also think that at times we also communicate numbers without giving the context of those numbers. So that's also the issue. Then at times people also conflate or they overhype information or overhype that this is the best thing which has ever happened since sliced bread, giving all those overhyping a technology and overhyping a new initiative. I think that's where most of people fail as well. So that those will be sort of my contributions.
Thank you. Musa, do you have anything to add to conversation?
Oh, very quick one. I would say, je devrais dire que les scientifiques parfois échouent en communiquant au public en général, parce que c'est pas de leur formation. Je pense que de plus en plus, il va falloir continuer à former des communicateurs scientifiques qui collaborent avec les scientifiques et qui ont reçoivent le message à partir des scientifiques et qu'ils le transmettent. Sinon, les scientifiques ont appris à communiquer sous forme de rédaction d'articles de publication, ce qu'ils font très bien. Et ça aussi, c'est pour le public. Donc, il y a des réflexions à faire autour de ça, surtout que nous vivons dans un monde où l'appel à l'information est très fort et est répandu sur l'ensemble de la communauté, de façon générale. Merci.
Thank you much. Thank you very much. I really appreciate all the different perspectives that we have heard today. I want to be respectful of the time for our webinar. Rosalia, anything from the consortium with any final remarks for today?
Thank you very much, Alana and Simure, for taking us through that session. And thank you very much also to our presenters, to the keynote speaker. So in wrapping up, we'll begin by saying that our objectives for the webinar were to look at ways in which we can help the general public to distinguish reliable scientific information. We wanted to be able to appreciate the importance of scientific verification. We wanted to be able to recognize misleading and exaggerated or unsupported claims. And today's information landscape enables rapid dissemination of scientific information and knowledge, and especially so rapid in this age of artificial intelligence, and enabling rapid spread of misinformation and disinformation. And that's why we were focusing on this segment today, to be able to check claims, clarify science for various audiences, because trust is at the center. While we endeavor to make the information accessible, we still have an obligation to ensure that to maintain that public trust, then accuracy or checking claims will have to be at the start and not at the end, because at the end, then it becomes very, very expensive, as has been exemplified by our presenters. It becomes extremely expensive, as was explained by Amalie in the case of Bana. So as we endeavor to make the scientific data known, then we endeavor to give this data out. We endeavor to continue with our trainings and getting out the information out right. And as we navigate the spectrum of evidence, issues that come out from this webinar include, in summary, that we need strong evidence. We need to begin with the truth and not start to seek the truth after misinformation has already crept into the communication that we are trying to send out. Okay, trust builds. We can go back to the picture of the funnel. Yes. Let's use scientific data verification. Let's use the model of the funnel as well. We begin to identify what is being exaggerated, and then we evaluate the methodology, as has been explained by our presenters. Where did you get the data from? What's the source of the data? When answering the questions, most of the participants that responded to the pre-webinar pre-webinar that we gave, the pre-webinar information that we gave out, said that the most important thing that they check is the source. So evaluate what has happened to that data in the funnel stage. Identify the exaggeration, evaluate the methodology, and then assess the content and the limitations. And then what gets out of the funnel is what has been verified, evidence-based, and facts that have been sieved through and let out all the raw claims be sieved through the funnel so that we are giving out verified evidence-based facts. Next. All right, so we wanted from this webinar to be able to ensure that we are building trust in the course of the work that we are doing. And we also wanted to impart knowledge to our participants on how to communicate to various audiences, because various audiences need different methods of communication. Next, on the audiences. All right, next. All right. Yeah, so engaging with various audiences requires various methods. We've heard of the methods from the community. Talk to them in the language that they know best, that they can relate to, and therefore they'll be able to understand your message. The policymakers, the general public, and also scientists and researchers encourage responsible communication of research and research findings. Next. Yeah, so at the African Genetic Biocontrol Consortium, we look at evidence-based decision-making. We want to ensure that we are continuing with this dialogue and encouraging, because we are a platform. We serve as a platform to encourage dialogue that would enable, you know, the responsible flow of information and the responsible release of information that would help in translating emerging technologies into safe, ethical, and impactful solutions. So we are happy to be able to continue to provide that platform as we build informed local leadership, informed communities, and also informed people that relay that information. Okay, and those are the areas where we're working. Yes, so as we continue from this webinar to enable and to endeavor to foster a culture of evidence, let's remember to check, okay? Check, and when you're sharing, begin with the truth. Investigate and verify, then contextualize, sieve the information that you've received, check, verify, look for other sources where it's been published before you send it out, frame the limitations and the uncertainty, and then communicate responsibly. Adapt language that is respectful, and even when you begin to debunk also in a respectful manner. So that has been checking claims, verifying, clarifying science for various audiences. We would like to invite your feedback in this webinar series. We would like to invite your feedback specifically to the third webinar of checking claims and clarifying science for various audiences. So it's already in the chat. Please pick the link and kindly send us your feedback. In that feedback form, you'll also be telling us about what other webinars you would like, what are the topics that you would like to be addressed. And remember, this is a series. The next series will happen next week, same time, that's Thursday. It's 3 p.m. It's East Africa time, right? It's East Africa time, and it's noon for GMT. So kindly, we'll share out the link to register for this specific one. Apologies for those who had a time mix-up. So remember, it is 3 p.m. East Africa time. Okay. The next in the series, Truth Under the Microscope, will be reporting the science right. We have looked at tackling misinformation. We looked at trust by design of communicating emerging technologies. And today we looked at checking the claims and clarifying the science. So then how do we report the science right? How well we're covering emerging technologies responsibly. That will be our conversation for Thursday. And we hope that you can be part of the conversation as well. We want to thank you very much for your time. We want to extend a word of thank you to all the organizing team that has been working behind the scenes. We want to say thank you to our partners. I saw them on the wall join. Thank you very much. We want to thank you, our panelists, our keynote speakers, and our panelists, and our moderators for taking us through this very, very engaging session. So from us at the consortium and at the secretariat, we want to say thank you and wish you a good evening. My name is Rosalia Omungo, and I'm the Chief Executive Officer here at the consortium.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rosalia. Thank you,
Rosalia.
everyone.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a
Thank you.
wonderful rest of your